And joining us to talk about China and Turkey relations, we have in our Beijing studio Mr. Yan Shuai, analyst at the Anti-Terrorism Center at the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations. Welcome to our program. Meanwhile, in Istanbul, Turkey, we are joined by Professor Selçuk Karakoğlu, who is a professor and president of the International Strategic Research Organization. He's also advisor to the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And meanwhile, in Berlin, Germany, we are joined by Mr. Joseph Yanin, Senior Policy Fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Gentlemen, welcome to our program. First of all, may I ask Professor Karakoğlu about the role that Turkey is playing right now with the military strikes against IS, Islamic State, and also the specific forces of the Turkish PKK, or as they say. Do you think the role of Turkey might be changing in the overall world anti-terrorism campaign?
Actually, Turkey has been suffering the terrorist activities for a long time. So not only the ISIS but also PKK were a challenge for Turkey's interests for a long time. Now Turkey has a stance more active role for fighting against terrorism. So starting with ISIS in Syria, in Syrian targets, and also PKK in northern Iraq. So then Turkey wants to be more active than before, because until now Turkey waited calmly and cooperatively in more quietly. But now these two terrorist organizations began to attack directly for Turkish targets. That's why Turkey has become more active role right now.
Mr. Yan, in Beijing, does China see eye to eye with Turkey, with Istanbul, on the issue of anti-terrorism? After all, are the enemies the same? And also, are the two having some common plans to fight against terrorism?
Yeah, we have different emphasis on anti-terrorism operations. Right now, China's major threat is coming from the Eastern Turkestan Islamic movement, while the Turkey is threatened mostly by the Islamic State and the PKK. But anyway, China and Turkey share the common interest, at least in combating the Islamic State. By increasing the cooperation on this issue, China and Turkey at least can increase the stability and security in the Middle Eastern regions, which is both beneficial to China and Turkey.
But at the same time, of course, what is more important for China, the concern, is the kind of separatism and terrorism that is going on in China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. How much role do you think Turkey could play in that regard in supporting China's unity?
Yeah, we, in China and Turkey relations, we emphasized a lot on the terrorism cooperation with Turkey, because recently Turkey's intervention in the separatism and terrorism from China has caused the tensions in two countries' relations. We have seen that some illegal immigrants from China was accepted by Turkey, and even the Turkey diplomats in Southeast Asian countries gave their assistance to the illegal immigrants from China.
And therefore, Professor Karakoğlu, would you respond to what Mr. Yan just illustrated from Beijing studio and help us to understand what is Turkey's official stance? Are the two countries really seeing eye to eye on the issue of anti-terrorism, or actually so many different priorities and maybe going against one another on certain issues?
Actually, Turkey and China have common stance against terrorism and also fighting of them. So terrorism is a crime against humanity. So not only Turkey and China, but also the other countries and international community must cooperate on that. So in principle and in main principles also, there are no problems and differences between Turkey and China. Regarding refugee issues or asylum seekers, Turkey, there are some differences between Turkey and China in that regard. So Turkey officially, as an official stance, Turkey has a liberal policy for asylum seekers. Now Turkey has been the largest hub for refugees, and there are more than 2 million refugees from Syria only. And also in that regard, Turkey has a policy if some people in need demand for asylum, then Turkey will give these permissions for that. But Turkey and China should cooperate on that. If there are some criminal people among those people, asylum seekers, then the Turkish and Chinese authorities should cooperate closely. And also, if there are criminals, they move back to China again. So also, Turkish and Chinese authorities can narrow this understanding for that. But in general principles, there are no differences for fighting against terrorism and other illicit networks around the world.
Mr. Yan, briefly respond from you, and then I go to Mr. Yan. Mr. Yan first.
Yeah, actually, most of the illegal immigrants are not asylum seekers. They are illegally go across China to even to seek jihad in Syria and Iraq. So to commit the terrorism violations against China.
Interesting. Mr. Yanning, you've been listening very attentively to the other two panelists just now. Of course, we are talking about China-Turkey relations, but on the other hand, the role of Turkey in terms of the global fight against terrorism and also its role within the European community about that fight has been evolving over the past few days. How do you think that has been changing so far? What's likely to be its nature and therefore having an impact, for example, its relations with other countries, including China?
Well, from the European perspective,
actually,
the development is somewhat of a mixed reading. On the one hand, it is obvious that when suicide bombings and suicide attacks occur in Turkey, that's an act of terrorism, and that deserves a common response and solidarity with Turkey, as was demonstrated in the NATO debate the other day. On the other hand, many Europeans are not very pleased with that development. They would have very much liked to see a continued dialogue between the Turkish government and the PKK, because they would have liked to see the PKK demobilizing or becoming more of a political organization and turning away from a militant terrorist organization, not least because of the role of the PKK in northern Iraq. And it is assumed in quite some European capital that the strike against the PKK also has to do with that role of the PKK in northern Iraq, that now Turkey sees that when disintegration continues in Iraq and Syria, that will inevitably bring up the Kurdish question, which so far seems to be under some control. And this whole puzzle is not really affected by Europeans, either inside NATO or inside the European Union. And so there is quite a bit of irritation about the motives and the trajectory of Turkish politics in the weeks to come, even in the light of solidarity under the umbrella of NATO.
I see. Professor Çolakoglu, would you like to respond to that, particularly the role of the PKK against the Islamic State, which has been believed by many around the world, and the Turkish strike against the PKK at the moment? Well, in relation to the fact that both China and Turkey are looking at an anti-terrorism campaign against the Islamic State. Professor.
Actually, PKK is another question in that regard. So I'm not sure that PKK is fighting in that sense Islamic State or ISIS in that regard. So there is a close associate for PKK, PYD in Syria. So the PYD and military wing of PYD are fighting against the ISIS and ISIS targets. So, but Turkey is targeting PKK, not PYD in that regard. So, and also Turkey is closely cooperating with Kurdistan regional government in northern Iraq. So, in that part, there is no legitimate problem for Kurdistan regional government in northern Iraq, and Syria for PYD, and Turkey is not directly offending PYD in that regard. This is the target for Turkey is PKK because of the recent activities and killings in Turkish territory in recent weeks.
Yeah. Mr. Yan, you respond?
Well, yes, I think that there is truth to this. It's a very complicated picture. I think what makes it so difficult is that the domestic agenda in Turkey mixes with the regional agenda around Turkey. And both factors interplay in a rather complicated way. So every action has effects not only inside Turkey, but will also have effects in the region, which makes it rather complicated. You know? You have at the same time in the coalition, international coalition against ISIS, you have the NATO member states participating as sovereign states, not as the alliance, but at the same time you have the alliance, the same member states as an alliance, supporting Turkey as part of NATO. So you know there are gray zones in this that makes things a bit more risky and unpredictable.
Very unpredictable at this moment. Mr. Yan, therefore, given the domestic and the regional role that Turkey is playing in terms of the anti-terrorism campaign, and also China's urgency and Turkey's urgency to work with China to fight against terrorism, how much ground of cooperation do we really have with the complicated political and religious backgrounds behind actually the two countries?
Yeah, although we may have some difference relating to the separatism and terrorism come from Xinjiang, but right now there is a great need for China and Turkey to cooperate on, especially on combating the Islamic State.
How?
Because the Islamic State is spreading and it's making the Middle East a center of international terrorism. Where is the...
What kind of a cooperation can that be?
Yeah.
Can you illustrate that?
First, I think China and Turkey needs to cooperate on the movement of foreign jihadists who uses the Turkey as a major entry point to enter Syria and Iraq. We can boost our intelligence information exchanges and enhance our law enforcement cooperations, such as like this.
You said that's first. And second, do you have other views and other ideas?
Second,
before I go to the other Turkish guest.
Second, I think Turkey and China can cooperate with each other on the Iraq issues. We can do domestic more resources and projects. We can cooperate on this issue.
Professor Çolakoglu, from Turkey, your point?
Yeah, actually, this is a very positive step for getting stabilization and development for the region, because we are just talking about the clashes, conflicts, and deaths. So we need a positive agenda, not only for bilateral relationship between Turkey and China, but also for international cooperation.
And therefore, what kind of role also you have on the one hand anti-terrorism campaign to work together, on the other hand those trade issues? How will the two countries weigh these two different issues on two different directions? Mr. Yan.
I think Turkey and China have a lot more areas that we can cooperate and which is more beneficial to each other. Especially China is putting out the One Belt, One Road strategy. In this strategy, Turkey can play an important role.
And Mr. Yan, of course, looking from the other direction, as you are, China's One Belt, One Road, of course, it's a huge project, could be with different European countries, including Turkey. So where would be the role of Turkey, since we're focusing today on this specific country's relations with China, and also its relations with China on anti-terrorism campaigns? How will these two different factors work together?
Well, I see that's going to be complicated. I think one driver for cooperation is the fact that in the Turkish eye, China is a major political and economic competitor. They're playing in very different leagues, but as you have shown in the outset of this show, China is very influential on the Turkish domestic market. And there are concerns that China is basically taken over Turkish business sectors one by one. And Turkey sees that there's an increased competition also in Central Asia with infrastructure or building companies. That's the economic side. On the political side, the Turks, for example, are very mindful of what happens in Iran. And they are mindful of the fact that China does support a return of Iran to the international community, which for Turkey also means a return of Iran as a major power in the region that is not necessarily pro-Turkish. So you see the cooperation between the two countries, if they manage to control the effects of their competition through cooperation in other fields like anti-terrorism, that's a good thing to happen.
All right, Joseph Yenning in Berlin, and also Selçuk Kolakoglu from Turkey in Istanbul, and also Mr. Yan Shuai in Beijing with us. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. This is, of course, a story that's seldomly covered, but I'm sure in the future there will be more opportunity. Thank you.